keep it simple, play our game, and get Ducks in deep. Hey everybody, I'm Zach Cavanagh, Anaheim Ducks reporter for the Sporting Tribune, and surprise, Mason McTavish has signed. We'll go into all the details from today's deal, as well as the notes on the negotiations with sound bites from Pat Verbeek's media call, all of which is transcribed at thesportingtribune.com in full. And we'll also look ahead to what this means for the lineup and how he's going to be integrated back into Ducks camp starting this week. But first, subscribe to the Sporting Tribune YouTube channel for all the latest Ducks video coverage, including new episodes of Ducks in Deep and full media sessions from post-game, pre-game, morning skate, practices, and everything in between. Follow the Sporting Tribune on all social media platforms at Sporting Trib and read more coverage on our website, thesportingtribune.com. And follow me. I'm on Twitter, Threads, and Instagram at Zach Cav. That's at ZACHCAV. And on TikTok and Blue Sky at Zach Cav Sports for all the latest Ducks news, articles, videos, and so much more. Plenty of content to fill you up from training camp and the preseason as we get rolling ahead to the regular season. But now, let's get in deep. All right, the long SoCal nightmare is finally over after 5 months of negotiations, a week of training camp, and 3 preseason games on the eve of the 4th. Mason McTavish finally gets his deal done with Pat Verbeek and the Anaheim Ducks. 6 years, $7 million per year, $42 million total. No trade clause, modified no trade clause in the final 2 years of that deal. 15-team no trade list on those 2 unrestricted free agency years that the Ducks were able to buy in this contract. And all things considered, it's a pretty fair compromise by all sides. Now, a lot of people, even myself, I think as soon as I saw the numbers said, well, yeah, that's what it was going to be pretty much the whole time, or at least in that range. What took you so long to get here? And we'll get into what Verbeek said in terms of how that went down, but it is what Verbeek ultimately said he got out of these other prolonged negotiations, fair market value. It's a little under the comparable Matthew Nyes contract that I had used and seen some others. Verbeek didn't get into the specifics about his comparables, but that was one that I had kind of pointed out, and I think that was a 6.75 a year, and it's in that zone, right? And that's sort of what Mason, the report, as we'd kind of gone over, I think we'd gone over on the podcast by then, that David Pagnotta, the fourth period, reported that Mason and his side were looking at 7 to 8 years at $7 to $8 million. The Ducks were reportedly offering 5 years at $5.5 million. And so this is still under that 7 and 8 years that the Ducks were looking for. It is, that step up, that 6th year for Mason. And it is more of Mason's money ask, that $7 million a year that he was looking for. So, and like I said, it only buys 2 years of unrestricted free agency from Mason's longevity. So it is a fair market deal. I think it's a good deal for the Ducks in the long term. I think it's a great deal for Mason McTavish in the long term. I think that he is the one that benefits the most here. And ultimately, it is earlier than by a few days than Trevor Zegras got signed, and by than Jamie Drysdale did. So you hope that Mason will be here on Monday, as Verbeek confirmed. The Ducks have a morning skate on Monday ahead of their game against the Sharks. So unclear what the schedule is going to be like. I expect there's going to be some cuts from training camp here in the next few days. So I don't want to give anybody a time frame if they want to show up, but that will be announced on social media if and when we're able to do that. But he's able to get in here. He's able to get a few days of hard practice in under Quenneville, get those up to speed. I don't think he'll be ready to go by Wednesday's game. I don't know if they want to shove him in and just feed him to the fire. That's not what the impression we got from Pat Verbeek in the media call. If he is going to play one, it is for sure going to be, or I shouldn't say for sure, but they want it to be that final game against the Kings next Saturday. And then they get basically 6 or 7 days off before they're in Seattle for the season opener, where I don't think I've said this here. I will be there in Seattle for the season opener, as well as the next game in San Jose. So some road coverage to open up the season, which will be fun for everybody. Some more on the ground, boots on the ground stuff. But when it comes to Mason, I think this is. I think the only way that this could have been a better deal is if it was done, a week ago or 2 weeks ago or a month ago, to make sure that he was here in camp from the first day. We talked. I think I mentioned a little bit about how he's been a notorious slow starter, and I talked to him about that last year, and he was dealing with like a little bit of a thing last year, like a muscle issue that resolved itself, and said he didn't linger for him, and he didn't even say that was the reason that he was having trouble. But you want to avoid those things because you have those injuries that happened to Trevor and Jamie early when they signed their deals late in camp. He's been skating with the Ottawa 67s up back home, and that is junior hockey. It isn't the same pace as the NHL. It's not the same pace as a Joel Quenneville practice. That, trust me, the practices have been high intensity, in the first week of training camp here. So ultimately, the deal gets done. Everybody's pretty happy from all sides. And the Ducks have locked up their number 2 center through 2031. He's the only player on the team locked up past 2030, and he's only one of 3 players that are currently locked up past 2028. The other 2 being Troy Terry and Lucas Dostal. Now, Terry is an interesting thing to bring up too, because Mason's $7 million is now ties him for the highest paid forwards on the team with Terry and Mikael Granlund. So, was that sort of a point for Verbeek? He's not going to get into the numbers. Even if we had asked, he wouldn't say what the actual money terms were. But the years they always talk about. So he didn't. He specifically said he didn't want to get into specifics about the details of things like that. So we can guess and say that that's probably where it's going to be. And ultimately, that doesn't matter, because once we get to next season, next summer, the highest paid forward will most likely be Leo Carlsson, as he has his RFA deal coming up. Cutter Gauthier could be in there, although a shorter body of work to show that he earns that money. So I think if there's going to be a tough negotiation for next summer, it might be the Cutter one, because of just the sample size to work with. So we'll get into some of that as we go through the sound bites, but I think that covers the broad strokes. Mason will be here on Monday. The team has him signed for 6 years, and the full Anaheim Ducks roster will be in camp and ready to go for the season opener not this next Thursday, but 2 Thursdays from now in Seattle. So I think we're all relieved to get this out of the way. I know, like, the team is ready to go. Every time I've asked these guys, I was ready to make the full compilation of all the quotes from the guys of how they're feeling. Like, oh, we want Mason here. We want Mason here. So thankfully, don't have to put that one together. There's all those are in the videos on the Sporting Tribune YouTube channel if you want to go look. Some good ones from Ryan Strome and Frank Vetrano. Troy Terry gave a insightful one, as he's also gone through these negotiations long term. So we'll touch on a little bit of that in the soundbite portion. So Mason's in camp, and excited to talk to him on Monday, see what his perspective on all this is, and get him back in the fold for the 2025-26 Anaheim Ducks season. Okay, so this afternoon, while the team was in Bakersfield, we got to do a Zoom call with Pat Verbeek. Video not working in terms of getting it, connected in the bowels of the Bakersfield Arena. So it was audio only. So I'll splice in some of those clips here as we go through some of these things. But just to touch on some of the things he talked about. So the first set of quotes that I'm going to play you are on the deal getting done and the process in which it took, the negotiation process over the course of the summer with Pat Verbeek and Pat Morris, McTavish's agent. So here's Verbeek on how the deal got done.
Both of us, we had, we have our processes, and I think he has his way of negotiating, and I have mine. But I think ultimately, I think both sides realize that you have to get the player in camp. The player wants to be in camp, and so you work towards compromising, for that to get done. So that was basically how it went um, last couple days actually. So it was just a process. You go back and forth on different things, and so each side tries to make their case, and so eventually kind of there's some commonalities that you can kind of put to bed, and then start working on some of the other differences. But I think overall it was back and forth on terms, sometimes back and forth on dollars. So ultimately we ended up settling where we settled, and it's not really um, one thing or the other. It was just a host or combination of things.
So as you heard Verbeek there, it not a whole lot of specifics. Basically, the long and short of that, yes, the player wanted to be in camp. They wanted him to be in camp, so they made a compromise. Which again is one of those quotes that you take and say, okay, well, if the player wanted to be in camp and the team wanted the player to be in camp, why didn't you all just come to a compromise before camp so that he could be in camp? It's a tough. Truly, it is a tough thing to parse. And Verbeek has always been very close to the vest, and there's been times we've gone through it all summer where he's at the beginning of the summer he said that McTavish was a priority, and then we rolled around to July 1st and he said, oh well, we got time to really get working on that. So it's like, okay, well, what did you do in the intervening time? And then of course you go months down the way and it's like you were getting going on that, you were working real hard, and then no deal. But so ultimately a lot of back and forth, a lot of ironing it out, and the deal gets done. I mean, that's how you expect the deals to go. I don't think anything really stood out for me from that part of our talk with Verbeek. So we'll just roll on to the next thing here. The next set I think is the important one to go into as we talk about the length of the talks. Now, I think the first answer is specifically in relation to comparing it with Trevor Zegras and Jamie Drysdale and how those dragged into camp. And the other two long-term contracts that we talked about, Lucas Dostal and Troy Terry, they got done ahead of time because they had arbitration rights. Mason is the first one to have that long-term deal negotiated without the arbitration rights. So here's Verbeek on the length of the talks and how that relates to the previous negotiations, and just what went into the length of the talks.
I think that's just the nature of the beast. It's just the way it happens. I think every agent has a process. We have a process that we go through, and you like to get these things finished sooner or earlier than later, but they just play themselves out. And so this thing was no different than the last time with Jamie and Trevor. I think this time around we got it done much earlier than last time. There's kind of a buildup, you can kind of sense to where um, I think both sides can kind of sense to where a deal's going to shake out, um, and I think you know the best deals are always the deals where both sides are unhappy, right? And so I'm not saying that we're unhappy, but it's like that's the process.
So yeah, as Verbeek said, and as I mentioned, done a little bit earlier than Trevor and Jamie were. It is the nature of the beast. Like, as much as we don't want it to happen, it's obviously happening in plenty of other places around the league. Luke Hughes in New Jersey still unsigned, for example, as another high profile RFA. I think the thing that's kind of interesting about how these things finally boiled down was we literally had this morning an insider report from Pierre LeBrun of The Athletic and TSN that it was status quo with Mason McTavish. I made the tweet, which then people responded to well after the fact because they hadn't seen it in their algorithm yet, of the Mason McTavish update there was no Mason McTavish update. And let alone a couple of hours later, maybe an hour later, there was a Mason McTavish update. Did one phone call ultimately turn this thing? Who's to say? As Verbeek said, there is a buildup, but it did feel like it happened suddenly because we felt like we were going to be locked into a protracted negotiation. There was the fear of him missing the regular season. And again, that goes back to the earlier quote of, well, if you wanted him in camp, you could have just got him in camp, either side on that part of the negotiation. So again, take some of this with a grain of salt. But that's just Verbeek's public thoughts on the situation. And how does that play into next year, right? If that's the nature of the beast, and you have 5 guys that you're going to end up dealing with, and those 5 guys, again, are Leo Carlsson, Cutter Gauthier, Jackson Lacombe, Pavel Mintyukov, Olin Zellweger. Lacombe is a little different because he will have arbitration rights, so that will certainly get done before the deadlines have to happen. But if it's just the nature of the beast, are you going to get into that same problem? Verbeek did say when we talked to him before training camp that it was something that they were kicking around working sooner. And so now we go into this and having experienced it and getting the deal done, he seems a little bit more receptive to working on some of those ahead of time. Here's Verbeek.
That becomes difficult. Like I said before last week, I mean, we're looking internally, at seeing if we can, get some work out of the way before next summer. So we're looking into that, and we're seeing, where that can lead to with our guys. So, it could be a situation where guys don't want they want to wait till the year's over, and we can approach it that way, or there might be a couple guys that will look into it and want to explore it. So we're going through that process right now, and see if we can't work some things out before next summer.
So a whole couple of caveats there in his answer, of course, too, of it depends on the player. Maybe they want to sit it out when they want to look at it. I think, like I said, Cutter might be the one that takes a while, not because I think Cutter is going to be difficult or anything, just it like himself, but the sample size, there will be probably a bit of an argument about what the value is. Like if you're looking forward or you're going bridge deal, or I feel like that's kind of a place where there's going to be a tough nut to crack. I think if we're looking at ones that can get done ahead of time, right? I think Leo can get done ahead of time. They know who Leo is. They know what he means to them. They know what kind of production he's going to bring. They know what kind of player he's going to be. I think if there's somebody that they want to lock up long-term and quickly and get that done quickly, it might be Leo. Now, is Leo going to be a guy that says, well, or is his contract or is his agency going to be, hey, let's wait out the season. Let's see how we do at the Olympics. Let's see how we do as the first line center. Let's see how we do pushing for a playoff spot to say, do we maybe increase my value and make that contract more lucrative next summer? Again, this is sort of just we're looking ahead. We're not no inside to that sort of thing there. But is that going to be a problem, or do you want to get it done? But regardless, it does seem that the team is aware that they need to get these things done quickly. It's, as the question was that, we didn't include, it's one thing to do with 1 or 2 guys, especially when 2 of those guys have arbitration rights or something where you have to get it done by the beginning of August and not September. But if you have 5 guys and 4 of them are going to be non-arbitration guys, you have to get started on that quickly, especially considering how important Leo is, Cutter is, and Jackson Lacombe, all very key pieces. I feel like Mintyukov and Zellweger may be the ones that also wait till next summer because of their, not uncertainty, but just how they've bounced around. And if they can both have, I think they would both rather have good seasons established going into a negotiation than trying to do it right now, where they could easily be lowballed at this point, and you don't want to do with that. So I think that's an important thing to note as we look forward to next summer. When those negotiations are going to happen, I don't know. It's always tough to negotiate during the season. And if we're talking about, I know people have said like coming out of the Olympic break might be a good time to like negotiate some of these things. There is rules on what you can and can't do during the break, 1. And 2, if we're talking about, say, Leo, well, Leo is probably going to be busy. He's probably going to be over in Milan playing for Team Sweden and not available to negotiate a contract during the Olympic break. So we'll see how that goes there. Last quote I want to play is the most detailed answer that Verbeek gave in the entire session, and had nothing to do with Mason McTavish. It had nothing to do with the negotiations. It's on Beckett Seneca. I asked, we talked about with him at the beginning of camp what the outlook was, where his options are. What do you see that you need from him? And so he's been in camp a week. They've had him in the dev camp. He's been playing these preseason games. He played in the one tonight in Bakersfield. What is his evaluation of Beckett Seneca right now? And we don't get any insight into what the plan might be for Beckett going forward. But here's what Verbeek's evaluation of Beckett through the first week of camp and a couple preseason games was.
Well, I think he's starting to feel more comfortable with the pace of play. I think, when I watched him in junior last year, he could really do a lot of the things, that he wants to do. And I think standing that he has to push hard and work hard and skate hard the entire shift, and he can't really coast. So some of the other stuff is getting used to being hit all the time. The one thing here is like they look to finish checks, and you can't look guys off, like in junior. So part of it is understanding the strength. He has decent strength to his frame right now. His weight could, obviously improve, but I think he's got a fine balance right now to kind of keep growing into that body of his, and so I'm looking for him to kind of improve his details with his defensive game and understanding his responsibilities and being aware and having an urgency for those responsibilities. He's obviously, we all know he's very talented offensively, highly skilled, really good vision and sense. But it's the difficult part is defending in your zone and managing the puck, even though he's not exposing the puck when he's in the offensive zone and protecting it. So those are things that little details that we'll continue to stress with him, and I expect him to get better, in the next week to 10 days.
So again, a lot of caveats in there, right? It sounds like a lot of things that he wants him to work on. He wants him to hustle, basically. He wants him to not coast through shifts. He wants him to learn how to finish checks or take checks better as he's getting hit all the time. Defensive responsibilities, managing the puck, building his strength. It's a lot of stuff. Now, if you can kind of hear at the end of the answer there is a little hesitancy in his voice as he's describing the timeline. He says, I expect them to get better in the next week to 10 days. There was a little pause, a little stutter. I took that as I was hearing the answer to be him kind of couching what their thought process is in terms of where he will go. Like, yeah, you can say next week to 10 days. He could have said over the next season here in Anaheim. He could say in the next tonight, we'll see where he is tonight before he gets sent back to junior, for example. Who knows what that is, but there is a little hesitancy, I think, of has he shown enough to warrant staying with the team during the season, even if it is on a modified Leo plan, even if it is using the Shane Wright's Seattle AHL loophole where they can keep him around for a long enough time and scratch him enough times, give him a conditioning stint in the AHL, et cetera, et cetera. Because as of now, the choice still is junior or NHL. And even if, he skill-wise is too good for junior in terms of his scoring output, you can still work on your defensive game. You can work on managing the puck, your passing. You can work on your strength. I think you would want him in Anaheim for a more NHL type strength and conditioning program, but you can give him a program to work on himself elsewhere. So it doesn't necessarily give you any more insight to what the decision is going to be come the end of the week with Beckett, but it does let you know that they see kind of what everyone else has said, that there still is a lot of flaws to his game. As Felix Sicard said on Twitter, of Crash the Pond, that he's still, a lot of those traits sound like a junior hockey player, which Beckett has been. How do you graduate out of those tendencies to become a junior hockey player, to become a more consistent pro as Quenneville wanted him to be? Can you do that in junior? Or would you rather do that under the watchful eye in Anaheim with some modified plan? Who knows? The bottom of the lineup in terms of who's going to be the extra forward is a little sketchy now because of Jansen Harkins officially being out for 8 weeks with an upper body injury. Does that open the extra slot to have Beckett hang around? Or do you want to use that slot for somebody that's going to be a more versatile Swiss Army knife type player like a Tim Washi might be? Who's this? We will find those questions out. We'll find the answers to those questions by the end of this week. So that's kind of where we are with at least Verbeek's more pretty open thoughts on Beckett Seneca going forward. We'll close this out by just looking ahead at the next week real quick. As I said, or have alluded to at the very least, preseason game was tonight in Bakersfield. Good showing for the Ducks, a comeback win, a 5-3 victory over the Kings. Pavel Mintyukov scoring a goal. Tyson Hines scoring a goal. Nathan Gaucher scoring a goal. And the game winner, short king Matthew Phillips. The AHL camp invite, 5'8", all 5'8", 161 of them. Puts another goal in net. Power play goal, first of the preseason for the Ducks, as they make a push there. It was a very AHL heavy lineup. The expectation is that there will be cuts to the Ducks roster tomorrow to go down from the double practices that they've been running for the first week and kind of hone in on the NHL roster in this final week, because the Gulls AHL camp opens Monday or Tuesday, and so they can get going with that. So there's going to be a trimming. There's going to be an increased focus as early as tomorrow, and certainly by Monday, of what this team is going to look like. And that's what we can focus on going forward when that happens. It's been a good camp for some of those AHL guys for sure. A lot of good looks to be had, impressions made. But at the end of the day, we're going to focus on the NHL roster. We'll talk about who some of those standouts were when the cuts get formally announced. But we'll do that the next time that we talk here on Ducks in Deep. And again, going forward, Mason McTavish will be in camp officially on Monday ahead of the preseason game against the Sharks on Monday night. The last home preseason game. So the last one that will be at Honda Center. And then they're in San Jose on Wednesday, and they're at LA on Saturday. I will be at the game in LA on Saturday as well to close out the preseason, get our final looks at everybody. As we said, maybe Mason McTavish's first game of the preseason, only game of the preseason, as he gets ready for the regular season, and we're getting ready to go. So there'll be plenty of coverage on Mason's arrival on Monday on thesportingtribune.com and of course on my social media. So again, follow Sporting Tribune on all platforms at Sporting Trib. Subscribe to the Sporting Tribune YouTube channel for all the latest interviews and more from Ducks camp and Ducks practices and games. Follow myself on social media at Zach Cav. That's at ZACHCIV on Threads, Instagram, Twitter, and on TikTok and Blue Sky at Zach Cav Sports. That will be where you'll find all the latest kind of quick hit news, as well as my stories and video clips that I'm editing together for this season. So Mason McTavish, signed, sealed, delivered. He is an Anaheim Duck for the next 6 years, and hopefully beyond that even still. So until the next time that Mason's on the team and the Ducks are playing, see you at the rink.